Thanks for ending your day with us. It's 11:30. You know what that means. We are ready for all things people, power, and politics. Welcome to The Pulse, my friends. I'm Roop Raj. A high-profile Democrat throws his hat into the ring, trying to become the party's next leader. And new Trump administration appointments you need to know about. This show has it all, so let's go. Speaking of those appointments, it's been a few years since we've actually been through that whole process. And if you've forgotten what it looks like to have those appointments, those nominees go through the Senate, we're here to help you understand it. Oakland University poli-sci professor Dave Duilio is breaking it all down for us. And the Motor City is in the spotlight for several reasons this political season, starting with President-elect's multiple disses and then the fact it'll have a new mayor after the 2026 vote. Political consultant and former Detroit City Councilwoman Sheila Cockrell is in the hot seat talking about how they'll work with Trump and the upcoming race to replace Mike Duggan. But we begin tonight with the rising tensions between Ukraine and Russia and the possible domino effect caused by President Biden's decision to let Ukraine strike targets in Russian territory. Those strikes would be done with U.S.-supplied missiles. Today, President Vladimir Putin in Russia lowering the threshold for Russia's use of nuclear weapons. It allows Moscow to use the weapons in response to even a conventional attack by any nation supported by a nuclear power. Putin has warned that allowing Ukraine to use these long-range weapons would mean Russia and NATO are essentially at war with one another. Back here at home, the huge losses by Democrats in the 2024 vote may have many calling for change in the party's leadership. And one name you might recognize is putting his hat right into the ring. Multiple reports say former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, who was also, by the way, briefly a presidential candidate, you may remember this back in 2016, is running for Democratic Party chair. O'Malley is the Social Security Administration commissioner. The vote for DNC chair will happen early next year. That's been a topic we've been looking into here on The Pulse. And two Democrats you know well, Sherry Gay Degnago and Brenda Lawrence, talking about what went wrong for the party this election and what the next leader needs to do to help this party move forward. In case you missed it, this is what they had to say about what went wrong and what needs to happen to fix a party that so many Dems say has lost its way.
There is a serious disconnect between our messaging and the people of this country. So we do have to do some soul searching, some house cleaning. At what level, we will see. But we do have to do things differently.
Did you see this coming?
I knew it was a very tight race, and I thought we could squeak through. I never thought we would get our clock clean like we did.
Look at the amount of money that was raised. Over $1 billion that was raised. And unfortunately, a lot of that money went into a number of elitist operations that did not include grassroots people and the people in the community. And we've said it over and over and time again, you cannot allow people to come into our cities from other areas. We had people from Houston, we had people from Pennsylvania coming in telling people in the city of Detroit what to do. That was wrong. And so even the people that are in the Michigan Democratic Party, it's not just the chairwoman, Lavora Barnes. It's a number of people that are a part of that staff. It shouldn't just be her. But who was she taking her direction from? She didn't make the decisions in and on her own.
More of that episode. It's a pretty good one. Just scan that QR code right there at the bottom right of your screen if you want to watch that full conversation or any other episode of The Pulse you may have missed. And, of course, you can also go to our website, fox2detroit.com. Check us out on our connected app, Fox Local. We thank you for being on this great journey with us. We're not going anywhere. We're continuing The Pulse as we head into other really important times. The head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency on Capitol Hill today after an employee ordered relief workers to avoid homes devastated by hurricanes Helene and Milton if they had Trump signs. That employee was fired, but claims the guidance came from higher-ups. Criswell, who heads up the department, says she supports an investigation, but added FEMA helps everybody, regardless of their politics.
Was the culture. They were already avoiding these homes based on community trends from hostile political encounters. It has nothing to do with the campaign sign.
The IG has not of yet stated they want to investigate this, but I highly encourage them to take on this case and look and see if this was a widespread issue or if this was just a single incident.
Pretty disturbing. A different team was sent out to reach homes that were skipped over at that employee's direction. All right, now to the incoming administration. The president-elect is nominating even more people to his cabinet, and we're diving into their bios. More on that in just a second, but there's no doubt there have been some controversial choices. So that got us wondering, do you approve of the president-elect's appointments to these key positions so far? We hit the streets to get a pulse check. This is what some of you told us.
They're great selections. They are designed to do exactly what he's been telling us he's been going to do, and that is to mix things up, shake things up, and they are definitely going to do that.
I feel like it's not real. It just feels like reality TV to me a little bit. Like he was just kind of like, let me just pick and choose who I want, you know. I don't think they're wise decisions.
Birds of a feather flock together. You know what that means?
I do.
And with those type of people, that's, you know, we expect the same thing from the top as we do the bottom.
I'm 50-50 with that guy, so really I don't even know what his cabinet selection is. I'm just kind of entertained by the shenanigans that are going on.
I think a bunch of clowns.
Do you like any of the picks so far?
Nope. Mm-mm.
We're also asking the question on Fox2Detroit.com, having you put your approval on a scale of 1 to 10. If you want to vote, it's easy. Just scan the QR code on your screen, or you can go to our website if that's old school. You want to do it that way. So far, the average answer is about a 6, but the majority of you say a 1 or a 10. So as you can imagine, there's one extreme or the other. It seems that way often in politics. Now to those appointments. The president-elect has made several more of them, and you'll notice a similarity between one of the ones we're mentioning today and one we talked about before. This guy, Sean Duffy, the president-elect nominated him as Secretary of Transportation. You recognize him? Well, you may, because he served in Congress for 9 years representing Wisconsin and joining during the Tea Party wave back in 2010. After leaving the House, he joined Fox News in 2020 as a contributor. Yes, just like Trump's defense secretary nominee, Pete Hegseth, who is also an anchor on the channel. The other key position, Brendan Carr, was nominated for Federal Communications Commission chair. He's been on the commission for a while and was its general counsel before, so he has a lot of experience in this. The FCC is independent and overseen by Congress. But you may remember this. Trump suggested bringing it under more White House control during the campaign even. Trump said certain networks that cover him in a way he doesn't like could be punished. Well, up next, Howard Lutnick, the president-elect, nominated the Cantor Fitzgerald Investment Bank chief to the role of Commerce Secretary. Trump touted him as one who would lead his administration's tariff and trade agenda, which he ran on. Lutnick is co-chair of the Trump transition team. And finally, a man you probably know from TV, Dr. Oz. He's been tapped to lead the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. Oz is a huge supporter of President-elect Trump and unsuccessfully ran for Senate. You remember that about 2 years ago? He'd report to Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. if the Senate confirms them both. So think about that. The Senate needs to confirm these guys. It's been a while since we've gone through that confirmation process, and you're also hearing some GOP leaders say they hope to get some of them confirmed through a recess appointment. What does it all mean? If you're wondering how all this may go down, we have Dave Dulio with Oakland University to answer your questions. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics, taking you back to civics class. If you weren't lucky enough to take Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio's class, well, you'll have one here on The Pulse. He's talking about that whole confirmation process for President-elect Trump's cabinet appointments. And, of course, we always thank you for joining us. Thanks for being with us here
today.
Thanks
for having me, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about this. This is, every 4 years, we learn about these cabinet appointments. What are some things that are just completely unexpected for you this time around that you haven't seen in past years?
I think some of the picks, as you mentioned before, have been unexpected. They're unconventional. I think this is going to make for pretty entertaining, and when it comes to political theater anyway, confirmation process. First several months of 2025 are going to be taken up with many of these unconventional choices.
So unconventional is one thing, but unconfirmable would be another. Who would you say, out of the list of people that you've heard so far, is going to really face the biggest uphill battle?
Sure, right? It's a spectrum, right? And there are slam dunks, no-brainers. Marco Rubio is going to fly through the confirmation process as Secretary of State. I think at the other end of the spectrum, you got to look at folks like RFK Jr., but I think the biggest one is going to be Matt Gaetz. I think that he doesn't have a whole lot of goodwill among Republicans or Democrats on Capitol Hill. I think he certainly has some
allegations, right, against
the
him.
Ethics report, and look, I mean, that's the biggest thing hanging over his head. There was no surprise or I guess pretty transparent why he resigned when he did to try to avoid that. But as you know, Capitol Hill is leakier than a sieve. So
Sure.
I would imagine that is going to come out at some point, and I think that's going to really make it hard for Republicans on the Hill to support him.
Some insiders, and if you're at home and you're not playing inside baseball with us, follow me for a moment here. Some insiders say that President-elect Trump may be trying to push someone like Gaetz through to see how much power he has to take such a controversial and divisive guy who many Republicans don't like and try to get him through. Do you think that may be something he's doing?
It wouldn't be a surprise. I mean, we're talking about Donald Trump here, right? The king of unconventional, right? And the king of keep people on their toes. It would not surprise me at all if that were the case.
And now, right now, we're talking about a 53-seat majority. So, yes, while there are mostly Republicans who have the power in their hands, there are Democrats there, and there are some Republicans who may not agree with all these confirmations. Will they have the courage to step up and stand up?
Oh, I think some of them absolutely will. And you look at somebody even like Mitch McConnell, who has had a rocky relationship with President Trump over the years, and he is on his way out. He's going to retire soon. So I think Mitch McConnell, as somebody who is so committed to the Senate as an institution and respects the role that the Senate has in these confirmation processes, maybe more than anybody on the Hill, I think he will take these very seriously. And if he doesn't think somebody should serve in a position, he's not going to vote for him. You look at somebody like Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, independent-minded senator. Same for Susan Collins. And then there are some Republicans who are up for re-election in swing states, like Tom Tillis from North Carolina. And all of a sudden, right, I just named 4. That's one more than the president can afford to lose on any one vote.
Well, what I find fascinating, though, is that the Republicans who have been heavily influenced by Donald Trump and understand his power when it comes to midterms and getting them reelected in their respective areas, they understand how important it is to be in his good favor. There are so many, including John Thune, who hasn't completely abandoned the idea of doing recess appointments. So let's talk about what that looks like. A recess appointment is essentially saying, look, the Senate recesses, the president pushes cabinet members through. How common is that?
It happens regularly. I think that we can find it throughout history, right? That it is a provision that is provided to the Congress and the president in a situation where let's put it this way. I think it would meet if the president goes through with something like a recess appointment now, it would be meeting the letter of the law, but maybe not the spirit of the law, right? Where it was meant for when the Senate was gone for a long time, when they were out of town, maybe back in their states, in a district work period, what we might call on the Hill, and they couldn't take up the nominations. That seems to be a little different than what it is this time, where it's just going to be, well, the Senate says we're in recess, slip them through, and then these folks can start their job. Now, he's got a good point with, that it takes a long time for this to happen. But with some of those folks, with all of them, actually, there should be a vetting process. There needs to be a deep dive into these folks who are going to have control of billions of dollars and a huge part of the federal government.
So let's talk about what happens here if there is a recess appointment. First of all, I find it fascinating. I think Clinton had 139 recess appointments. George W. Bush had 171. And Barack Obama, the president then, had 32 recess appointments. But these were not huge cabinet positions. So that's the difference. But what's interesting is the Supreme Court came out in 2014 and said, hey, we may not love this idea. It doesn't honor the Constitution. So they put some guardrails in place. Talk about those for a moment.
Well, Barack Obama, when he made some recess appointments, this is prior to that case, but he made some appointments, a half a dozen of them, I think, to a little-known entity in Washington called the National Labor Relations Board. And he did it as a recess appointment, but the Senate disagreed that they were actually in recess. So somebody got mad and sued, right? And so you have this face-off, goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the Senate is in recess when it says it is in recess. So it was a matter of, hey, look, the Senate gets to control this stuff. So, importantly for now, if the Senate goes in recess, the president will be able to do whatever he wants with those recess appointments. But don't hold your breath that all those Republicans will support going into recess.
53 Senate majority doesn't mean that everybody's going to agree. This is a fascinating conversation, one that begins tonight, but will continue. You know, they say everything you learned in grade school. Kids know when they're on recess. Just ask them.
That's right.
They know. There's no question. Dave Dulio, thanks for joining us here on the Pulse tonight. Detroit is in the political spotlight, both involving President-elect Trump and who's going to lead it after 2026. Former City Council member Sheila Cockrell, a political consultant, is talking about Detroit politics. You're watching the Pulse here on Fox 2. Dave, thank you.
You got it.
Great work as usual.
Where?
It is People, Power, and Politics. Thanks for staying up with us here on the Pulse and joining us to talk about how Detroit will work with President-elect Trump and the race for mayor. Former City Council member and political consultant Sheila Cockrell. And I was just reflecting with Sheila about when I first got here as a young reporter in my 30s. You were always so kind to me as the city at the time was going through such difficult times when you were a council person here. Man, the city's turned around. Let's talk about the city of Detroit. What have you noticed if you had to tell someone from out of town at an airport how Detroit is doing? What would you tell them?
I'd say that Detroit is doing well, that their political leadership, both elected and appointed leadership in the city, has been very good at, building up the ability for the city to have a financial future, and has really worked at some of the service delivery issues that the city was facing, and basically Mayor Duggan will leave the city in as strong a position as he could, understanding there are still structural weaknesses that have to be addressed. I mean, the interest and principal payments on the recovery bonds are going to come due, and the cities will begin to have to pay the full freight for the pensions, in addition to providing all the services. So the question becomes, how does the general fund deal with that? And the general fund is now primarily income tax as opposed to property tax. So this will be then, every time I see a headline that says one of the autos is laying people off, you got to go, whoops, what's it going to do? How many people in Detroit, or how many people who work in Detroit, are going to be impacted? And that's going to always affect the bottom line on the budget.
So that's fascinating, because you say these bonds will come due, the payments will be due, and the general fund, this is going to be passed along to somebody else who's going to want that office. And so for people to assume that they're just inheriting everything we saw during the NFL draft, in this glorious, beautiful downtown and this wonderful, we also have a lot of kind of institutional issues in a 140 square mile city. So you have Mary Sheffield, Joel Hashim, Fred Durhal III, and Saltil Jenkins. Not asking for an endorsement, asking for your opinion in general. What do these folks bring to the table?
Well, I think the one person I don't know at all, Mr. Hashim, so I cannot comment on him. Each of the other people bring experience and history in politics in the city of Detroit that will equip them to be a really reasonable candidate. The question is going to be who can put together, not just get elected themselves, but who's going to be able to attract the team that you need around you in order to be a successful mayor in the city of Detroit? Who's going to work with you as your CFO, as your COO? I mean, who are those people going to be that are actually going to be managing the gears of government?
And you think Duggan did a good job with that, putting a good team together? And,
absolutely.
And how important is that? Because people give a lot of credit right to the mayor.
Yes, and the mayor, I think the mayor would credit his team as well. But yes, tone is set at the top. Whoever is mayor is critically important, because that's where the message gets sent, where the culture gets set, and that drives how people approach their responsibilities. But a strong team, you can't be successful without a strong team.
So Donald Trump, the president-elect, has said now 3 times things about Detroit in different circles, and essentially saying, look, this country will turn out like Detroit if you let a Democrat win, was essentially his message. But he also had some deeper messaging there about the auto industry and concerns he has. Do you see any credence to some of his concerns about Detroit and the problems that plague the city?
I think that the president-elect is going to need to have an urban strategy that's different than what has evolved over time. If you notice, he doesn't appear to like too many big cities at all, and I think that's going to be a hurdle that's going to need to be addressed by both his administration and by local units of government. Do I think there's opportunities to find ways to work together in the interest of all the people who elected all of these folks? Yes, I do. Do I think it's going to be a challenge? Absolutely. Do I think that if, to the extent that his administration begins to implement Project 2025, the unintended consequences of some of those policies will be really serious for the large urban areas.
I want to talk about that for a moment, because you hear, two versions of President-elect Donald Trump. You hear he's going to adopt all of these Project 2025, issues that are laid out in the Heritage Foundation's 800, 900-page book. But that thing has been around for like 4 decades. That book has been around. It's evolved, and certain presidents, including Reagan, have taken pieces of it. Are we to believe that this is a man who campaigned on so many of those things that he'll actually institute it, in your mind?
I think we have to watch it very carefully. His vice president elect wrote an introduction for the latest version of 2025, and he's put in place now at least 1 or 2 people who were contributors to Project 2025. So I think we're going to have to see how that really plays out, particularly because there's data that shows that many of the proposals are very unpopular with regular people in cities and suburbs and rural areas all over the country. So it will be interesting to see how much actually gets done. It's going to really, I think, be impacted by who are the key people who are actually have their hands on the levers of government and can actually implement something.
And that's why these cabinet appointments are so critical and so important. One last question for you. Mayor Duggan sat in this seat just a few days ago, and he gave a lot of credit to the success for him being mayor in the taking away the us versus them mentality within the city of Detroit. Governor Whitmer just recently has been credited for not joining a bunch of governors who are Democrats in this country to put up a front against Donald Trump, but instead say, I'm going to set that one out. I'd like to be able to work with him. Do you think that's the right approach here?
Yes, I do think that you have an obligation, whatever your personal feelings may be about what a person represents. When you're elected, you have to find a way to work with as many parties as you can. So I understand that, and I agree with that. But I do think that we have to wait for all the data to get in and settle out in terms of who voted for who, and Trump did not have the landslide that was initially predicted. What this has done to the body politic, if you will, we don't really know yet. And how are divisions around race and class going to play out? I think it's a whole topic. How did race affect how this election turned out for white people, black and brown and Asian people.
Sociologists and historians and journalists will be talking about it for a long time.
Yes.
Sheila Cockrell, thanks for the conversation today here on The Pulse. That is The Pulse. Remember to scan that QR code right there at the bottom. You can send me an email anytime, also at roop.raj@fox.com. Maybe your burning political question will be answered on a fact check right here. I'm Roop Raj. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
Yeah.